Well, the last time I was a little bit up in the air. I thought maybe let's do Acts, but since then I started reading the book of Hebrews and realized, well, number one, uh, along with the rest of the books in the New Testament, it has a ton to help enrich any follower of Jesus. And there's some specific things in it that are again, like all the other books in the New Testament, are very worth our time to dive in and do the best we can to understand them. So I've done a little course correction here, and I want us to look into the book of Hebrews together. The first thing that I think we need to talk about and think about with Hebrews is that it was written to Hebrew people. And one of the things that will help us understand the book of Hebrews is a little bit of background on Hebrew culture. I have found a very helpful and useful study tool for this. It's called the NIV Cultural Background Study Bible. That sounds it's a mouthful, but and it's not cheap. If you want to buy it, it's a little expensive, but it's a reference book. All reference books are kind of expensive, unless you can find them somehow downloaded free on the internet, which I didn't find that. So, but at any rate, I really recommend this study Bible. One of the advantages of being able to get into or get your hands on a study Bible is that there are some fundamental questions that get some at least addressed, if not answered, by the editors of study Bibles. Okay, so Hebrew culture was, by the time the New Testament, by the time of Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection, Hebrew culture dominated. This is a duh. It dominated Israel. You got to have advanced degrees to know that, right? Well, why is that important? It's a couple of things. One, because the Hebrew culture was dominant there, influenced by Greek and Roman culture, but still more or less a standalone culture. There were some problems politically and militarily that arose, so that if we'd gone through the book of Acts, we would realize fairly early in the book of Acts, the Roman government began persecuting Christians. Well, that matters to the Jewish culture because early on, virtually all the Christians, all the converts, were Israelites. They were Jews. I don't want to make it all about this, but okay, I pushed a button for myself here. I have zero tolerance for anti-Semitism. I don't understand it. Well, I think I do. And what I understand about it is it's just hate. And think about this. I remember a man named Harry Heidemann. He's one of the most amazing keyboard players I've ever met in my life. Played for Sammy Davis Jr., and the Rat Pack. I met him in Las Vegas. His wife was a very devoted follower of Jesus and also a top drawer musician herself. Harry came into my office and he said, Steve, I've been coming to church with my wife, and it makes a lot of sense to me. But my problem is, if I become a Christian, I'm a Jew. Heidemann, you might suspect, as a Jewish last name. Well, yeah. And he was in a quandary because he didn't want to be disloyal to his ethnic roots, his family. And I respected that. But I also realized he might have been working from a little bit of inadequate information. So, and I had earned the right in Harry's life to ask pretty pointed questions and be pretty direct. So I don't know that I would do this with everybody, but I did with Harry. And I said, Harry, was Jesus a Jew? Well, yeah. I said, what about John, and what about Peter, and what about Paul? All Jews. See, here's the thing. If you say yes to Jesus and you accept his ownership of your life, you're not being disloyal to your roots as a Jew. You're acknowledging the strength and value of the ultimate Jew, Jesus. Well, not in that moment, but eventually Harry, he left my office feeling a little bit less troubled about the whole issue, and I was very glad for that. The Jewish culture is, even today, for conservative Jews, a pretty rigid culture. Of course, it's not like the culture of the Jewish community in the year 30 AD. And yet, there are similarities. Okay, so why does that matter? It matters in this, that the book of Hebrews was written to Hebrews after the persecution had begun in Jerusalem against the church, which was primarily at that time Jews. They left Jerusalem and they went into other parts of the Jewish empire. It came down to it, in that day, they went to the rest of the world. And they took with them both their Jewish culture and heritage and their faith in Christ. So one of the things you may know about Hebrew history is that Jews seem always to have been able to prosper economically wherever they were dispersed. I don't think that's certainly not the most important thing about the Jewish culture, but it is an issue. Wherever the Jews went, they knew how to make money, and so they made it all over the world. Well, the book of Hebrews was written and directed at those Jews who were dispersed from Jerusalem into the world. Most scholars believe it was probably the Jews dispersed into the eastern Mediterranean area. I think that's plausible. I'm not sure that you can make a open and shut case of it. In fact, I'm sure you can't. So the first thing is it's a book written to Hebrews in a way that fits with their culture. Okay. The second thing is we don't know who wrote it. You would have to be a Greek scholar, which I am not. And my daughter Jenny is. I always love getting to tell people that. So any Greek I know is so very second and third hand. I can't, well, anyway. But those who are Greek scholars tell us that the Greek that the book of Hebrews was written in is cleaner, if I can use that term, better Greek than what Paul wrote in. I'm taking their word for it because I have no way of, I don't have any reason to doubt them, and I have no way of finding out for myself any further than their scholarly opinions. There are primarily, there's only two suspects for the writing of this. One would be Paul's traveling companion, Silas. And the other, this was one that Martin Luther thought was the case. Now my brain, I'm having a big time trouble here. Silas and who was it that Priscilla and Aquila befriended and taught him more completely? Oh, it was Apollos. Wow. It's just fun when that happens, isn't it? I truly hate it. Whoever it was. Another aspect of it is most scholars believe it was written around the year AD 68. This is after Paul had been crucified, murdered, and died as a martyr. And that, again, makes Paul less likely as the author. Okay, so one of the things about the Hebrew style of writing and cultural, all those cultural connections and things have to do with what is like a literary balance. Things are often talked about in pairs. There are, through it you're going to see these pairs. And another thing is, Jews basically taught through argumentation. They were not very Platonic. With those few things in mind, I want to dive into it, but I've already burned up 14 minutes out of my 15. So my challenge is, if you got 10 minutes or 15, start reading the book of Hebrews and use whatever version that you use that speaks to you. You know, we're so blessed to have so many choices. But start reading. You don't have to read the whole thing. Just give it 10 or 15 minutes and see what you think. And then next time we'll start with Hebrews chapter 1, verse 1. Until then, though, I'm done. I'll see you next time on So Care with Stevie Boy.